as geopolitical lines harden, four major powers stand at the crossroads: United States, Russia, China, and India. The energy chessboard is set. Welcome to this broadcast. Today is 6th of August 2025. By the way, today is also 80th anniversary of nuclear bombing of Japanese city Hiroshima and 3 days later Nagasaki. Welcome to this broadcasting 7 at 9. August 8. A deadline burns bright. President Trump issues a final warning: 100% secondary tariffs if Russia refuses to de-escalate. Countdown begins, tick by tick, targeting Russia's war economy, igniting global energy recalibration. So let's have a look on US sanction strategy. Washington's four-pronged offensive unfolds. Tariffs to destabilize pricing for Russian oil and that way undercut the Russian financing of its war in Ukraine. Sanctions targeting elites. More Russian elites and factories, companies to be added on the sanction list. Financial isolation through swift banking maneuvers. Russia could be squeezed out completely from the international SWIFT system. And eventually also military assistance to Ukraine and even the military posturing. Under the stars and stripes, economic warfare takes the stage. So Russia is facing major threat of serious economical sanctions, which by this time could be more effective, less bypassable and less manageable for Russia. However, we need to take into account that Russia has its own strategy as well and is prepared. We could see that Russia in the near past, when the war started, avoided major economic collapse due to the Western sanctions. We see that while Europe was more or less steady in its import of oil and gas from Russia, other countries significantly helped Russia to survive other economic sanctions. So Russia was able to manage the Western sanctions and completely rebalance its export. It diverted oil exports to India and China primarily. As you can see, Europe became the marginal importer of Russian oil, while China and India became the major ones. As you can see, the Western sanctions to some extent really worked. Despite Russia's rerouting of its export to other nations, the overall fossil fuel export revenue significantly dropped. So new sanctions can move it further. So let's have a look what is happening. As I said, there are four major players: Russia, United States, China, and India. China was increasing its import of oil from Russia. At the moment, it's taking about 47% of Russia's total crude exports. That's the number for the last year. However, in case of China, the majority of this oil is processed and consumed in China, because China is significantly increasing its energy consumption. China's pipeline to Moscow surges from 1.2 to 2.5 million barrels per day within 3 years. Refineries hum, ports flow. Crude trade hits 47% of Russia's total exports, fueling Beijing's leverage. India is another major player. Delhi enters the equation with precision. 52.7 billion invested. 1.96 million barrels per day flowing into Reliance and Nayara refineries. Russian crude now accounts for 40% of India imports. A strategy driven by distance, price and politics. So what India and China did? Well, they spent much more on Russian oil, which allows Russians to finance their war. As you can see on the graph, just between March and May 21 and March and May 22, there was a dramatic increase of import of Russian oil. So when the war started, Russia immediately rerouted its export to India. So if United States activates already announced sanctions and introduce secondary tariffs, we would see major clash between the four nations. However, it will be difficult to reroute and it will have consequences. Cost rise as tankers stretch toward Brazil and the Gulf. Carbon emissions will spike. Russia pivots revenue eastwards, and Western alliances feel the strain. Each barrel redirected, each dollar spent, adds complexity to the tightening game. So we have the major escalation of situation. Either the United States will do nothing and lose its face, or will have to encounter to severe economical war with other partners. The stakes intensify. From Trump's warning to Witkoff's diplomacy, a sanctions menu unfolds across headlines. NATO forces shift and support more Ukraine by material supplies. Russian deployment response. Kremlin declares rupture in relation. That's potential scenario few days from now. President Trump starts to play strategic chess with Russia. And at last, the board is revealed. China and India command leverage. Trade routes dangle at the edge of disruption. Oil is no longer just a resource. It moves as a geopolitical chess piece. Because every barrel, every deal, every pivot moves a nation. And this is it for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see how the situation will develop, what will be the outcome of negotiations of Steve Witkoff and Mr. Putin, and what will be the next step on the chessboard by President Donald Trump. Thank you very much for listening and for your attention, and see you next time. This was 7 at 9.